Hey guys, it's Nicole. Welcome back to another video, or hello if you're new, welcome. I am so excited for today's video. I came across a couple of days ago, or it was probably a couple of weeks ago now, this video where this guy watched the first and the last episode of Pretty Little Liars, and I was like, oh my god, this is so fun. I want to do my own bookish version of that. So in this vlog, I am going to be reading the first and the last book in book series. I spent about a week, 2 weeks trying to decide what book series and what books I wanted to use for this vlog. I also wanted to make it a rule for myself that I was not going to use trilogies, because I feel like it's very easy to just skip one book and then fill in the blanks for what you missed. And I also thought it would be fun to do one middle grade, one YA, and one adult book. I'm interested to see if I can put more of the pieces together in the middle grade series in comparison to the adult series. So the first book series that came to mind when I decided I wanted to do this video is A Series of Unfortunate Events. Now, I have read the first book and I believe a couple of the books after the first book when I was a kid. I literally do not remember like anything about the books. I read them when I was probably like 8 or 9. So it's been a long time. And what I think I most remember from the series is from the movie. All I can remember is the baby, I think her name was Summer or something. She loved to bite things, and I can remember her being like on the table hanging from her teeth. I wanted to use this series because it's a series I've literally told myself since I was a kid that I was going to read and finish. And like, I started it when I was a kid. I didn't get that far in. I think I read the first like 3, maybe 4 books. I don't know. I don't remember. And I always told myself I was going to go back and read the series in completion, but you know what, I've been lying to myself. So I'm going to use this, and I think it'll be fun because I feel like a lot of people would have read these growing up. Next is the young adult series I'm going to be reading. This was really incredibly hard. I feel like within the last 10 years, all the popular young adult books I've like literally read. Or if I haven't read the entire completed series, I've at least read the first couple of books or maybe the first book. And like I said, I didn't want to do a trilogy. There are so many YA trilogies out there. I ended up deciding on Stalking Jack the Ripper, but I have also read this. I read this a few years ago before I'd even started BookTube, so it must be about 3 years ago I read this. I didn't love this, but I have been curious to give this book a second chance just because of how well loved this is. And something else that really appealed to me about using this book for the series is because, again, it's like a 4-book series or 5-book series. I don't even know because I'm not going to read all the books, you know? To me, it's a 2-book series right now. And then for the adult series, I decided on The Witcher. Now, this was kind of interesting because I have read The Last Witch, which is like a short story collection that's like an introduction to this world and the characters. But this is book 1 and this is book 5. I did have to do a little bit of research into like how the series order like kind of works, but I think this is how it works. So this is technically the first book and this is technically the last book. This is going to be really interesting. I do hope that I don't end up loving any of these and like kind of regretting my choice to read the first and the last book. I have decided I'm going to start with the middle grade and then go to the YA book series and then to the adult series. Okay, it's later in the day, it's like nighttime now, and I finished this. This didn't take me long to read at all. It was interesting. I definitely didn't remember much, and I was right about Summer and her teeth. This is like the most random thing to remember. When the whole reveal of Olive's plan to take their fortune was revealed, I remembered that like when it was revealed, like that kind of clicked. and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. But like everything else, I literally didn't remember a single thing. I'll just give a quick synopsis of this in case you haven't read it. We follow 3 orphans who, at the beginning of this book, their parents died. In my memory, they died in a car crash. In here, they died in a fire, and their whole entire house burns down. They lived in this like really grand mansion, and they are then sent off to this relative they've never met, a distant relative, Count Olaf, who is a really seedy guy. But Count Olaf definitely didn't take them in out of any love or desire to actually take good care of them. He's taken them to gain his own, for his own gain. I can remember now as a kid really loving Violet. Violet is the oldest of the 3 siblings and she's an inventor, and I just remember thinking that was really cool. So the last book in this series is called The End, and it is book 13. I'm so interested about what books 2 to 12 contain, like the books in between this. I'm guessing it's going to revolve more around Count Olaf trying to, I don't know, get what he wants out of these kids. I would think there would be another villain or more villains. I don't see how Count Olaf would carry the entire story, like all 13 books, to be the villain. Something else I'm curious about is the age, the characters age up, and how many years the books go over, because they're orphans and it's about their struggles of being orphans. Once Violet, who in book 1 is 14, once she's of age, she can technically take in her younger siblings and they will also have whatever their parents left them behind, they'll be fine. So I'm wondering if in this Violet comes of age, but literally the first sentence of this book 1, says that the story does not have a happy ending, and I think it means the overall story of the series. I think my favorite part about this book was the narration. So Lemony Snicket is like a pen name. I know his real name's like Harry or Henry. It's something very ordinary, and I really like how the author kind of wrote themselves in, like, almost wrote themselves in the story. I'm really interested to see whether or not we actually get Lemony Snicket come in as a character. That's something I would really love to see. I don't really have anything else to say or any other predictions. I have a feeling from memory that each book is about them going to some relative, because at the end of this book they leave Count Olaf and go to another relative. I'm gonna go and start this. I'm very interested to see how this goes. Like, this is where it's gonna get good, guys. Well, it might not be good, but it's going to be interesting, to say the least. Okay, I've read like 210 pages and I think this is like 320 pages long, so I've almost finished. I'm going to keep this whole video spoiler free, and I doubt I'll ever get into like spoiler territory. If I do, I'll give you a heads up. I am glad I didn't read all the rest of the books in this series to get to this one, and I don't know if I'm glad because I don't have that investment that you would if you followed a series. But to be honest, I think this is kind of disappointing for a conclusion book. We start off and Olaf is already back. So he must be like a cat with 13 lives because he's in every single one of the books apparently. I don't think he's the only villain. They kind of alluded to other people they had trouble with, so I think there were other villains, but it seems like Count Olaf was and is the main villain of this series. I don't think a lot of time has passed between each book. My main reason for thinking that is because Sunny, the child, or Summer, the youngest of the 3 children, she still can't really talk. She can talk a little bit better, but she still seems like she's in toddler stage, and that kind of bothers me. I don't like it when there are so many books and so little time passes. That's actually one thing I struggle with some middle grade. I find that a lot of them do have very little time pass within the story. I guess because they want to keep the kids as children, like they don't want them to age up. But even as a kid, I can remember that being something I didn't like about some books. Now, I'm really glad I started with the middle grade. The reason I wanted to go in age range is because middle grade does tend to do this thing where it's one sort of villain or one sort of story for each book, and this is sort of doing this, and often middle grades can be quite contained. I can remember when I was reading around, like when I would have been like the appropriate age for this, and I would have picked up like random books, you know, in a series. I would have never checked if it was book one. I wouldn't have cared, and a lot of the time middle grade is like that and it's accessible like that. So I wanted to see how that would go for this series, and that's why I wanted to start with middle grade. I'm very interested to see how the YA and the adult books in this video goes, because I feel like especially the adult book is going to be really different. I think it's going to be a lot harder to read because I'm going to be missing a lot more information that's needed to enjoy the story. But for the most part in here, I'm following along fine. I was kind of a little bit worried, but it honestly doesn't feel like, you know, there's been another 11, 12, how many books are in this series again? I don't know, but there's over 10 books that I skipped to get to this, and it doesn't feel like it. Like, we still have the kids, they don't seem much older, Count Olaf is still around. There's definitely stuff they've alluded to that I know I've missed. So it seems like there was stuff about their parents that discovered. I think they're just about to learn more about their parents. And I do think I was right in saying that I think each book focused on them being with a different family member, or, you know, them being taken in by someone. And I honestly am glad I skipped the series. I don't think there would have been enough that kept me interested over 13 books. And I feel like I can kind of form an opinion on the entire series just having read the first and this last book. I think what I'm most surprised by is that this series didn't really lead up to some sort of grander overarching plot. But thinking about a lot of middle grade, I guess it doesn't really do that. Like I said, a lot of middle grade stories are very individual and contained within one book, even though it might be part of a series. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go finish this. Okay, so I completed the final book in a series of unfortunate events. I am actually, like I said, kind of glad I didn't read every single book in this series. I definitely think I might have enjoyed it a lot more have I read it still being the right age group. For a series of 13 books, for this to be the end, I'm not really satisfied, to be honest. So that is the conclusion of me reading this series. Next, let's move on. Well, I actually have already moved on to Stalking Jack the Ripper. I've nearly finished this. I have about 100 pages left, so I'm going to finish this today. I have been enjoying this much more than I remembered. I did listen to the audiobook the first time I read this, so perhaps the audiobook didn't work for me and that wrecked my enjoyment somewhat. This book follows Audrey Rose, who wants to do, what's it called? I can't remember the name of the person, but her uncle's one of those like scientists that looks at dead bodies and can kind of figure out how they were killed by looking at the trauma on their body. I can't remember the word of it, but she wants to apprentice under him and learn his sort of skill, profession. But obviously, as a woman in this time period in the late 1800s, it's not acceptable for a woman to do that or have any profession of her own. So she, you know, she's a woman not of her time, so she's not like other girls. It's very, very clear. This is also set during the murders of Stalking Jack the Ripper. And I think when I first read this, what I was disappointed is on the back of this book, it literally says, he murdered women in cold blood. He terrorized an entire city. He taunted those of us who hunted him down. But despite all these horrors, in the end, I could not dandy it. I was the girl who loved the Ripper. But it's not a love story between her and the Ripper. It is like the biggest misconception of this book. There is definitely a romance that is happening with her and this like Thomas guy who is another apprentice under her uncle. The Stalking Jack the Ripper murders happen, and because of her uncle's profession and because she's an apprentice under him and Thomas is an apprentice under him, they're sort of working with the police a little bit to sort of help uncover the mystery of the murders, and she's also sort of doing a lot of extra detective work on her own. I don't think the mystery part of the story is great. I think what I really don't like about this book is a lot of the side characters are very 2D. There's not much to them, and they only kind of come at points of the story where they're needed to sort of move the plot along or steer the plot in some sort of direction. Only really Audrey and Thomas have any really good character development to them, and even then I don't think it's fantastic character development. I definitely think this is a fun time, and I can see why this book is so popular. I might have probably enjoyed it when I read it when I was younger more. This would have been a book I ate up when I was a teenager. I loved these sort of books. While I am enjoying it, like I said, more than when I read it the first time, it's still a series I don't think I would have been invested enough to read every single book. Well, I know it's not. I have a package right here, and this should be the final book in this series. Okay. Well, that was pathetic. Pathetic again. Usually Booktopia like has really good tear strips. I don't know what they call it. Yes, it is it. It's actually a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. Look how what size difference. So yeah, this is the final book. I think it's book 4. I honestly just like figured out which book was the last book. I didn't look at how many books were in a series. What I'm really interested about this series is I think there's going to be more that I'm missing in comparison to the middle grade. There was a lot in a series of unfortunate events. I felt like I could just sort of fill in the blanks on my own, or it wasn't even really necessary. But I feel like I said in my previous clips, that's kind of the nature of middle grade. Whereas I'm interested to see how it goes here. I feel like there's going to be a lot more missing pieces, might make this story harder to read. But another thing about this series is I know that every book in this series sort of focuses on a different villain. Like I said, this is Jack the Ripper. I know the second book I think was Dracula. I'm not sure who the devil is in here. I also think they travel actually. Actually, no, I shouldn't read the blurb. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not going to read the blurb because I don't want like any help, because you know how blurbs kind of sum up what happened in previous books. So we don't want help. I don't want help. No, the last time I updated you guys, I was almost finished Stalking Jack the Ripper. I did finish that shortly after that update, and this took a while for me to start. I'm about halfway through, so I'm 205 pages in currently. I'm not sure if I had anything really to add about Stalking Jack the Ripper. The most notable thing to say about that book is I definitely enjoyed my reread of it a lot more than I read it the first time round. Particularly Audrey Rose, the main character, I liked her a lot more when I read it the second time. I remember the first time I read it, she was too much of that I'm not like other girls trope that I found her quite insufferable. But this time I didn't really mind her. I still think that the story overall lacks a lot of things that I love to personally see in my books. Like there's not a lot of layers to things. Things are quite simplistic in terms of the plot, in terms of the mystery, even like the feminism that this book is trying to show and discuss. It's very, I feel like, basic, surface level. It doesn't go into the deeper kind of complicated roots of the issue that I always love when books do that, and my favorite books tend to do that. So these are definitely not favorites, and I'm definitely still happy that I'm like reading them again, giving that first book a second chance. But I'm also glad that I'm not going to devote myself to the whole series. I'm up to halfway through this book currently. I am actually following this so easily. I think because this series is a murder mystery, and from what I can tell, each book kind of had their own villain and their own contained story, and there's not too much of an overarching story apart from really the main characters getting together, that I haven't really missed out on that because I saw the start of their relationship in book 1, and I think I just missed a lot of their sort of up and downs in their relationships, and you know how there's always, you know, a third party member that comes in to try and break them up. Like I've missed that. In here, there hasn't really been a main plot, I would say. Like the main plot is these two characters trying to wrap up their relationship and actually get together. There's been little bits and hints of a villain and a murder, but it's really taken a back seat, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought that since this is the last book, that we're gonna have a big kind of, I don't know, showdown, I guess, with, you know, the main villain. Okay, here's my thing. You know with YAs that the characters are always going to end up together. You just know that. It's very, very rare that it doesn't happen. And so when there's all this conflict surrounding these two characters, and to pull these two characters together or prevent them from getting together, you know that it's just drawing out the story, and I don't feel as engrossed in the story because I know that things are going to be resolved and they're going to end up together, because you can always tell with how the world has been set, how their characters have been set up, and just, I don't know, you just know, you know, I don't know how to explain it, but you just know. We kind of got a bit of that situation happening for most of this book, and it's just like, I mean, I know they're going to end up together, and we're still having conflict. I'm sure there was more conflict in the books I've missed, so thank God I didn't read them and have to deal with extra conflict that I would have had to put up with, because I do not want that. And something I will say that I think is quite cool is it seemed like every single book in this series was set in a different place, but this one is set in New York, which I really like, and Stalking Jack the Ripper was set in London, and I think the second book was set in Romania. I'm not sure where the next book was set. The third book, I think it was set on a ship, but I don't really know. However, I will say I don't really feel too much of a difference between the New York and the London setting, because a lot of the story is actually set inside. Do I have any theories about how this book is going to end? I think that's going to be an interesting and fun question to ask. Well, number one is I think the two characters are going to end up together. I guess we're going to find more out about this villain. It's interesting because the villain in this book in particular links quite closely to the villain in book 1. Honestly, this book just feels like book 1 2.0. Like, it doesn't really feel much different. There's some characters that have definitely been introduced that I missed them being introduced in the books I skipped, but I know enough of who they are, like they kind of reintroduce them, and I feel like you get the gist of who they were and you can just kind of fill in the blank yourself, or at least that's what I've done. But yeah, overall I'm kind of glad I skipped this. I don't think this book series needed to be 4 books long. I mean, we'll hold off on that announcement until the end of this, but look, I think that's going to be the case, or the same case. It's clearly been a while since I've updated this vlog. If I had not moved, honestly, I would not tell you guys how much time it's been since I abandoned this vlog. It's been 6 months, maybe longer. Yeah, we're not going to get into reasons because they're not interesting, and we're just going to carry on. I rewatched this footage today and I thought I had completely given you my final thoughts on this and wrapped up this series, but I had not, which is a little unfortunate because I did finish this book not too much longer after I filmed the previous clip, but I never told you guys my final thought. I did find my notes. Thankfully, I always take notes. I used to do just on the Notes app on iPhone, but now I've been doing it in Notion, but I found them on the Notes app because I was still doing that method when I was reading this book. I'm just going to read off what my note says and we can try and make sense of it together. So I said, apparently something I forgot to mention in the first clip was how short of a period the whole series occurred, and I do remember this. I think the whole series only happens within a year. It's a very short period of time, and something that surprised me about it was because this is set in, what period is this again? It's set in a time where you're not flying on planes, right? And these characters do travel quite a bit, and so it kind of surprised me that the books were set within a year or so, especially considering the amount of traveling they did. It just seemed a little bit like, I don't know, like, I questioned it. I don't know how realistic it is because I haven't done research into it, but I did like go, do you make sense? I'm not sure. I wrote a note that lol, Thomas's power of deduction is ridiculously unbelievable. And I definitely think this book had so many cases of convenience just to move along the story. A little too many in my opinion. I also wrote that there were so many references to the previous books, and I can remember this, reading this and feeling like I actually didn't miss out on too much in terms of not reading the 2 books I did not read for the series, because there was so much recapping in this particular book that every character we come across in here, if we met them in book 2 or book 3 that I did not read, we had a whole introduction to them and a whole backstory in here anyway, so I was caught up to speed. So I also added a note saying, I hate how some facts from book 1 have changed. I can't tell you what the facts are because I've written a spoiler here, but I've also added the mystery seems so weak. Maybe I could have missed details from the other book, but this book makes the first book feel worthless because of how much is repeated. Now I do remember thinking that it was a very formulaic, is that how you pronounce that word? I hope that is how you pronounce that word. Way the story mystery is set out, and it's very much the same as book 1. Sometimes I think that works in author's favors because I do think it can make a story comforting in the sense of it's like a familiar storytelling sort of way, but also I think it can do some stories, I think especially mysteries, sort of a disservice because it makes them predictable. And if it makes them predictable, I think there has to be some sort of element that keeps you intrigued, and unfortunately this book didn't have something extra. My last note is, WTF, the end is so long, why? I don't know what that means, but there you go. I think a mistake I made with this series though, and maybe even with the series of unfortunate events, is these books are so individual. They've got their own sort of thing going on, and I think it's easy to, I don't know how easy it is to pick up, but I felt like I wasn't too lost in the story, whereas if I picked up a big fantasy book, perhaps I will be a little bit more lost. So with further ado, we are going to carry on to the last series for this video, The Witcher. Now, fun fact, I actually read this back right after I finished this book. Obviously, it's been a really long time. I did not know what I was going to come on here and say about this. I did film a clip, but I wanted to have this book fresh in my mind, so I actually reread this just recently. I still don't have any predictions like I hoped I would. I'm going to give a quick synopsis. I feel like I don't need to give too much of a synopsis for this because it is such a popular series. I feel like most people understand that the basic premise of this is we follow this guy called the Witcher, who is essentially a immortal supernatural being who in this world travels around and he kills monsters. This book, and I've actually started this one, so keep talking about this one and then I'll get to this one, but both of these are told in a way where the narrative jumps around. When I first started this, I definitely found that really jarring. It's one of those stories where we're introduced to the main character, we see the main character, and then it's like they sit down to tell a story, their story to someone else, or what happened in their big mystery. But then we're flipping to all these different POVs. There are some POVs that we flip to that are relevant, that are like friends to the main characters, and relevant to the story, but then there's like random characters, particularly like random dukes, random knights, that actually don't have much relevancy to the overall story, but then somehow know parts of these main characters' story, and so then they like chip in and say their bit. It jumps around so much, and I don't think I'm the biggest fan of it, to be honest. Yeah, I am not the biggest fan of it. Most of the storytelling in this is also done through dialogue between the characters. Just way too much. It's interesting because this book is set up where we have all these characters talking about Ciri, and Ciri is missing, and then we're switching between all these different POVs to like piece together this story of what happened to Ciri, the mystery of Ciri, etc, etc. And in here, the exact same thing happened at the start. So I am currently 100 pages into this, and it doesn't feel like any different from this book. It is clear time has passed, which I appreciate. There's definitely evidence that time's passed. Ciri is much younger in this than she is in this book. I also think this is partly set in another world. The other thing is with this series is there's no real plot. Like, there's no plot in this book, and I was hoping when I reread this book I could like gather some sort of plot to make some theories about what was going to have to go down in this book. I have zero. I have zero. My only guess is I feel like the Witcher, as in Geralt, is going to die and Ciri is going to like take over his position. Is that what we'll call it? I don't know. We'll go with that. That's it. I have nothing else. So, which I guess is a good thing, because I think out of all the books I was predicting the adult series for me to not have much to say on. I finally did what for some time felt like impossible and finished this book. I don't think I said this, but the sequels I read for this video, I'm not rating. It's not fair, so I'm not going to rate them. I'm just going to mark them as read on Goodreads. I think the last third of this was quite strong, and I did really like seeing Ciri, Geralt, and Yennefer's relationship. Obviously, there was quite a bit of missed since I skipped a few books, but they have a real found family dynamic, which I really enjoyed reading about, especially Ciri and Yennefer's like mother and daughter relationship. I really enjoyed. I will say I got quite sick of like the whole destiny thing. It's very repetitive how destiny is so important, and like how particularly how like Ciri is like this child of destiny, da 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 da. Still had like no predictions or nothing that I thought would happen. I think the thing I said about Ciri happened before this book, because it was clearly there's something about Ciri. I feel like it's obvious. I feel like you know Ciri's gonna become a Witcher, and then it happened by here. I have nothing interesting to say, unfortunately. Like, I went through all that and I wish I had more interesting things to say, but really it's the narration style of this book I just did not like. I don't like how it switches from all these random perspectives and then like eventually like pieces together a story. I find that because the writing is dry, and a lot of these like side characters that we're following, or these other characters that aren't the main like trio, they're so bland, and I just did not enjoy following them. I have not played the video game, but I do plan to. I almost considered scrapping this vlog while reading this book, but I'm not going to. Obviously it's up now, you'll be able to tell, but I scrapped so many vlogs last year, which is why I sort of held on to this one. But looking back at the footage, I've sort of edited a bit. If I was to go back and do it now, I'd do one series, not 3. I think that was like just too ambitious and over my head. I could have done like more detailed on just one series. What did we learn from this? I think what I wanted to know starting off was I able to predict, or could I predict anything from reading book 1 that would happen in the final book? The answer to that is no. I didn't even like come up with predictions. I think as well, I don't think I chose the best books. I think with a series of unfortunate events and the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, they're not very plot heavy books. Even this book is not super plot heavy. There's a bunch of books I have read, or a bunch of series I have read, which I would have loved to have done for this video. These books are really plot heavy books, and I think would have made for really interesting analysis like of plot. Like, that's what I really wanted, was of character plot and just like story plot, to be able to like predict or make guesses or assumptions. I had none. Like, I feel like I just didn't have enough material, because there's a lack of plot, especially in this book. And I feel like even in Stalking Jack the Ripper, it's not that there's a lack of plot in those books necessarily, but the stories are so individual, they don't really carry on through. Like, I needed a series where the plot and everything had like an overarching story that carried through each book, sort of thing. So yeah, that's the end of this video. I am so relieved to have this video done. It can finally be crossed off my to-do list. I know it was a little bit chaotic, or maybe a lot chaotic. I don't even know. I feel like I had like an interesting point when I started off with this video, and I don't have any points to make. So anyway, I hope you got some enjoyment out of this. Let me know if you read books out of order, or if you have. I feel like it's something I did when I was younger. Like, as a kid, like, you just go to the library and you pick up a random book. You don't really worry about whether it's the book you're up to in the series. You just want something to read. But as an adult, that's something I definitely do not do. And I
hope you're well, enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and hopefully I'll see you next time as well. Bye!